This is video number 4 in a series of 5 videos that I'm doing on what I refer to as the FORCE strategy. And FORCE is an acronym. Each letter stands for one phase of a process that I recommend for improving your language proficiency by interacting with the target language community. So the first video, I did an introductory video, and then I talked about F is for focus. And O is for organize, where you organize the material that you will use. R is for rehearse, and that's what I discussed in the last video. And tonight I'm going to talk about communicate. When you go to communicate in your target language, you want to rehearse right up until the last minute. It's really important to repeat the things that you're going to use in your interaction with a native speaker in your target language, to repeat that content out loud. It's not enough to just have it in your head and to be thinking about it. You actually have to say it out loud. There's something very powerful about knowing that when you go to say something in your target language with a native speaker, that you've said it before, even if it was by yourself. So say these things out loud, and check the details of what you're going to say before you get into a conversation rather than after. You should be very well prepared by the time you get into the communicate phase of the force cycle. You'll notice sometimes that when you're talking with somebody in your target language, they may speak more slowly than usual. Don't be offended by that, but people who are skilled at talking with those who don't speak their language as their mother tongue, they know to slow down, they know to perhaps limit their vocabulary to less technical terminology and to speak really clearly. So be grateful for that. But you can also tell them, hey, I'm understanding. Go ahead, you can speak a little more quickly if they're talking to you a little extra slowly and it's not effective anymore. Communicating is the most natural thing in the world, and it's the way that people pick up languages in the most normal and natural way all around the world. Learning real language by listening and speaking in real context is by far the most common way of becoming bilingual. I've got all these textbooks and an iPod and a computer and all kinds of CDs and recordings and other tools, and they're really great. But people have been learning languages for thousands of years, and people today are learning languages without all this, without all the technology. Now, I'm not ready to give up my technology at all, but you just need to know that communicating is a normal and natural thing, and you can become bilingual by communicating effectively, by using your language with people who speak it better than you. And using it in authentic conversation is just so powerful. You'll enjoy it, you'll find it inspiring and exciting, and you'll find that you make a good, fast, measurable progress by using your target language with people on a regular and consistent basis. Like children, when children are learning a new language, they do most of the listening. And they listen to the language that's around them, and that's how they take the language in. That's what you have to do when you're communicating with somebody who speaks your target language. It's more important for you to participate by hearing a lot and listening a lot. And of course you want to talk, but your goal is not to monopolize the conversation or to do 75% of the talking. What you really want to do is participate enough to keep the other person interested and get lots and lots of samples of the language that you're learning from a native speaker. I mean, it's the greatest lesson in the world. You're not even paying for this, and you're enjoying all of this top-notch input. So create these situations for yourself by using the force strategy. What you're doing is you're sort of creating an artificial immersion. I would love right now to spend the next 6 months in Germany, and I can't do it. I can't afford it. Unless you want to send me the money to do it, I'd be grateful. But until that happens, I'm creating my own artificial immersion in German right now. I know some people in my social network who speak German fluently and with total native proficiency, and I'm creating artificial immersion. So this is part of how I get in these communications situations. But before I get into my artificial immersion, I make sure that I'm prepared. I have selected a focus. I have organized some material. I have rehearsed that material so that, and part of that is showing respect to the person who's going to give me their time and give me the opportunity to use my German, for example. I tend to make a mental map of where people are who speak my target language. If I'm going to speak Portuguese, I can tell you where in my part of Vancouver I can find people who speak Portuguese, and it's just part of how I plan to increase my proficiency by interacting with other people. I position myself to soak up the target language. I'm not just hoping that randomly something will happen, I'll magically have these opportunities. I'm manipulating the world to suit my purposes for language learning. Remember that the majority of the world's population is multilingual. It's very common for people to be bilingual and multilingual. Not so much in Canada, and there's certain countries where it's not as common. But there are lots and lots and lots of people who have learned languages simply by interacting with other people who speak the language that they're trying to learn. So you can do this. You don't have to be exceptional. You don't have to be extremely talented. You don't even have to be that disciplined. There are some undisciplined, lazy people with poor education who are learning new languages today. So imagine you, if you make a plan and you put a little effort into it and strategize a bit and follow some guidelines, perhaps the 4-cycle that I'm giving you or somebody else. Imagine what you could do. People are learning languages by accident. What if you set out to learn a language intentionally? You can do this. So take courage and get excited about this. Be prepared when you communicate with other people to hear compliments or comments about your skill. One of the things people will talk to you all the time about is your experience as a language student. So, you'll start speaking French and someone will tell you that you speak French very well. And you need to know how to respond to that too. The way that we respond in English, if somebody says, oh, you speak French very well, you say, well, thank you. In other languages, you don't always say thank you. There's other things to say. And it's something that you want to be prepared for, because this will happen. Somebody says, vous parlez bien le français. You want to say, vous trouvez. Or somebody says to you in Portuguese, você fala muito bem o português. Você acha. These are normal ways. Rather than saying something that sounds like English using Portuguese words, say something that a Portuguese person would say or a Brazilian would say. In Japanese, when somebody says something about your excellent Japanese, you minimize your skill. You say, oh, well, I'm not very skilled. I don't know very much Japanese. In Spanish, my standard response, somebody says, compliments me on my Spanish, and I said, es favor. I say, es favor que me hace. Thank you. You're being very kind. You're flattering me, more or less. People will talk to you about the target language. When you start speaking German with people, they will be interested in talking about the German language, maybe their experience with it, some of their knowledge about it, about different kinds of German, about High German, Low German, Swiss German, Bavarian German, and so you want to be prepared for that. There are certain topics that come up when you first open your mouth and start using your target language with native speakers. One of them is you as a language student, and another is the language itself. So expect that and be ready for it. Chinese people and Thai people will talk about how difficult their language is to use in written form. German speakers, as I said, will talk about High German and Low German, and French speakers will talk about Canadian French. At least I'm in Canada here, so I'll hear conversations about differences between Canadian French and France French and Northern France and Southern France, and all of that's interesting stuff. So be ready for it, because that's the kind of stuff people want to talk to you about when they discover that you have an interest in their language. Your goal is to communicate real meaning without using English or whatever your native language is. So you're not trying to hit perfection. Well, I mean, I guess we're always trying to hit perfection. I would love to speak perfectly in every language that I open my mouth to use. But be realistic. Your goal is to exchange meaning. It's to get things done. It's to accomplish tasks. It's to buy food in your target language. It's to exchange information about your family with another person and find out about that person's family. It's not about speaking perfectly. It's about communicating real meaning. So, it would be nice to, get a dollar's worth of practice, but what you'll probably get is a penny's worth of practice over and over and over again. And that's a great way to get it, because if you were realistic, you'd realize that you can't take on a huge volume of new language in a language that you're not very strong in. So you'll get these little opportunities, these quick conversations, and they add up and they make a huge difference. When you're using your target language in real situations, you remember this because every bit of your senses is open and attentive, and you're focusing and you're trying very hard. If you make a mistake, you'll remember it forever. You'll fix it. If somebody teaches you a new word or a new expression, it'll stick with you. It's amazing the power of learning this way. I think it's more effective than so many other things that I've done to learn other languages. So I would say that a few sentences, a few greetings, a few courtesy words are enough to get going. If you try to accomplish too much, you won't enjoy it. You'll probably get frustrated, you might get tired, and you might convince yourself that you're really not doing as well as you actually are, because you'll be hard on yourself. If you make it too long, you get tired and you lose track and you get beyond the scope of the focus that you've set. And then you go home and say, oh, wow, I haven't learned any German at all. And it's not really true. You want to keep it shorter for that reason. I recommend keeping your communication events to something around 15 minutes or less at first. And later on, you can increase the amount of time as your proficiency increases as well. You can multiply the value of your cycles, your force cycles, by repeating the communication phase a few times. So I've been telling you that you go focus, organize, rehearse, communicate, and then we'll talk about evaluating next. But often what you will want to do is focus, organize, rehearse, communicate, 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 and evaluate. So for example, if you're learning how to buy something in German, okay, so you set a focus. I'm going to go buy a case for my iPhone in German. I'm going to find somebody who speaks German, and I'm going to organize the words that I need for that. I'm going to practice that material. And it's not that you have to go out and buy 20 different cases for your iPhone just to practice your German, but okay, now you've got to focus, buying stuff. Okay, what else could I buy in German? Oh, I know there's a German guy who works in the bookstore. I'm going to go to the bookstore and maybe buy a dictionary. And a lot of the same material that I have from my focus and my organizing phases that I've rehearsed are ready to go so that I can communicate again and again and again. And then the material that I'm working on, that I'm trying to internalize and make work for me in a very natural way, is more thoroughly internalized, more thoroughly acquired. And you'll also have to be flexible and creative when you are in your communication phase. There is a technique that you'll use a lot, whether you know the word for it or not. It's called circumlocution. Sometimes you don't know the word for something, like the case for an iPhone in German. So you might say, I need something that goes on my phone to protect my phone. And you're talking your way around what you're trying to say directly. And then the person you're speaking with will hear you doing this circumlocution and will supply the word for you and say, oh, you mean you want an iPhone case. Ah, that's it. And because it happens in live communication and you're on the spot, you'll remember that word for the rest of your life. You'll probably never have to look up that word again. You'll know what a case is. If you don't know how to say something like crutches in your target language, you might say, what do you call the things that people use to help them walk when they've broken a leg? And then the other person will say, oh, you mean crutches. You'll remember the word crutches forever. Avoid translating as much as possible. Instead, use a few other ways of getting the job done. For example, use clarification. So you didn't understand what was happening. Rather than jump into English or whatever your mother tongue is, say something like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that word. What do you call those things? You can point or you can do something else, so you're clarifying. You can also use repetition to get more value out of these conversations without resorting to your mother tongue. So the person says, oh, the things that you were talking about, those are called crutches. And then you say, crutches? Yes, crutches. Oh, okay. And reinforce it and repeat it. You can also confirm, use confirmation as a technique for avoiding English. So your husband has to use crutches for a few weeks. Is that what you mean? And so you're confirming and cementing the new material in your mind by using a confirmation technique. Another very important technique, this is a form of circumlocution, is paraphrasing. So rather than translating word for word, you work thought from thought to thought, idea for idea, and you translate more or less, but idea for idea rather than word for word. It comes out sounding much more natural. And often when you're lacking the material that you wish you had, you can get the job done by paraphrasing. Say it in other words, and the person that you are talking with will help you to communicate. So you'll say something like, if I understood you correctly, you said the doctor has given him something to help him walk until his broken leg heals. And then the other person will say, yes, the doctor gave him crutches. So you're paraphrasing. You're talking your way around the word that you're missing. Another super important skill, and this is the one that everyone uses, the greatest polyglots in the world, the greatest language students in the world, rely very heavily on a linguistic technique called guessing. You have to guess. You will hear some percentage of the conversation. You will be able to participate really effectively in some percentage of the conversation, but you're going to have to guess. You're going to have to pick up some clues. It might be body language. It might be some pointing. It might be the context of the conversation that you're having. And you'll hear certain words like broken leg and saw the doctor. And then you'll see the person motioning as if they were walking on crutches. And you guess. You've never heard the word crutches. And the other person isn't explaining it to you in a way that you understand. But you can figure out this word crutches. So guessing is super important. Don't be afraid to guess. And you'll be wrong sometimes. You'll guess and you'll get caught and they'll say, you didn't understand what I said. You were just faking it. You're pretending. Well, of course, that's what you do. You guess. That's what everybody does when you're talking to them in your mother tongue and they're learning your mother tongue. They're guessing sometimes, and sometimes you realize, oh, they didn't really understand what I said. But we're all doing this, so cut yourself some slack. Allow yourself to do that a bit. Some people will answer you in English when you talk to them in your target language. So find some friendly ways to switch away from English. I remember one guy told me that when he was learning Punjabi, people would talk to him in English, and then he would reply to them in his broken Punjabi, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say these things in English. If you speak Russian, perhaps we could speak Russian. And of course, they didn't speak Russian, and they would stay in Punjabi. He was lying. I don't think I would use that strategy. I remember another guy, and I think I've told this story before, who learned how to say in Swahili, I do not yet speak Swahili. Instead of saying, I don't speak Swahili, because then they would speak to him in English. When he said, I do not yet speak Swahili, then they realized he was trying to learn, and they would continue to do that. But another thing you can do is explain your goals. Tell the people that you are talking with, hey, I'm really trying to improve my German. Do you mind if I speak for a minute or two with you in German? Or can I buy you a coffee and I'll switch to English when you finish your coffee? And then you'll see how desperate they are to finish their coffee and get away from your German maybe. Talk about your idea, assuming that you're believing what I'm saying here. Talk about the idea that you believe you have to speak to learn. You have to use the language in order to learn it. And that you recognize that studying from books is not going to make you bilingual, and you really need opportunities to speak. And people are very understanding about that. There's another line that I use with a lot of frequency, with a big smile and the warmest gestures that I can muster. I'll say, hey, your English is excellent. You don't need to practice, and I don't need to practice my English. Do you mind if we speak German for a few minutes? That goes over quite well. It's good to compliment other people on their language accomplishments when you're asking them to help you make progress yourself. You can say things like, wow, your English is so advanced. I'd love to be able to speak German the way that you do. Can you help me practice? Can we speak German for 5 minutes or 15 minutes? Or, depending on the relationship you have with your conversation partner, you might say, do you mind if we meet every Saturday morning for a half hour? I'll buy the coffee and you let me practice my German with you for a bit, and then we can switch to English if you still have the strength. You can also say something like, wow, you must have practiced a lot to learn English so well. I'm trying to learn German too. And then they realize, oh yeah, at one point somebody was very patient with me while I was learning English. Maybe I can help this guy out with his German. And most people are very willing to do this. They're happy to do it. But they're most happy to do it if you're having a real conversation. If you're having a fakey, stupid conversation just based on some vocabulary list you happen to pull out of a book, people won't enjoy that at all. Have a real conversation. Engage with the person you're talking with. Ask them about their family. Ask them about their experience of learning English. You've got to focus, sure, but be willing to work on a focus that might be enjoyable and meaningful for your conversation partner, so that when you're communicating, they can enjoy it, and they're not just sort of being used as a live dictionary that you're trying to keep running with copious amounts of caffeine. You need to expect a few things when you are in the communication phase of the force cycle. You'll hear a lot of things that you don't understand, and that's normal. It gets better with time. Just being exposed to the language, you'll find that you understand more and more. So don't be discouraged. At first, you'll say, wow, I'm not sure I understood 25%. That's okay. If you had the same conversation, or something very similar, for a little while, you'd find you'd understand 40% and then 60%, and you really didn't do anything more. But understanding comes with exposure. You will occasionally get lost, and you need to be ready for that. You need to be able to say things like, I don't understand. How did you say that? Would you repeat that for me? How would you say that in other words? But you will get lost, and you may, especially at first, have to break into your first language just to keep the meaning flowing back and forth. Another thing that you will have happen is you will start to say something and you'll be unable to finish the sentence. That is super frustrating. It's especially frustrating if the person you're talking with can't help you at all because they don't speak any English, or whatever your mother tongue is. So you start speaking and then you realize, I have no way to finish what I'm saying, and you can't ask for help. That's just going to happen. You got to live with that and brace for it. You might want to learn some phrases and expressions that will save you in that context, like being able to say, hey, I don't know the word for that. I don't know how to finish this sentence. And be able to laugh and say, I'm kind of frustrated, but I'm going to keep learning, and next time I will finish all of my sentences. You need to be able to negotiate meaning. It's not just throwing words back and forth, but sometimes it's not clear on your first attempt. You say something, it wasn't clear, you didn't understand, or the person you were speaking with didn't understand, so you negotiate meaning. You paraphrase, you clarify, you ask some things, and then you also have to be able to end after a reasonable amount of time, and don't abuse the person that is helping you with your target language. Learn how to say helpful expressions in this context. Learn how to say something like, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that in your language. You will always understand better than you speak. At the beginning level, at an intermediate level, and an advanced level. Your understanding is always way ahead. And that's a good thing, because the truth is, in a language that is not your mother tongue, the other person is more interesting than you are. So you don't need to blabber on. You need to participate, and you want to become a speaker and not just a listener. But understand that you're going to be listening more than you're talking, and that's a great thing. What happens is when you listen and listen and listen and listen and listen, it eventually will flow out of your mouth. It's like filling up a cup of coffee. You fill it up a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more, and it will come out, it will flow over the top. So listen a lot to your target language. Be happy when you can understand a lot, because your mouth will start to say the kinds of things that you're listening to and hearing. And you'll say things absolutely perfect in your target language, and you won't even remember the grammar behind it. You'll just say, man, I've heard this so many times. I've heard other people saying this. I understand this perfectly. And now it just seems to come out of my mouth. That's what comes from using the force cycle repeatedly. Keep a good sense of humor about your mistakes. You got to be able to laugh at yourself. It's easy to say. I get embarrassed, and I think most people get embarrassed to some degree. But, laugh it off and keep going. People appreciate it when you have a good sense of humor about your mistakes. Think of yourself in reversed roles. If somebody's speaking English and they're learning and they make a big mistake and they laugh about it, that's a very pleasant thing. If they get ashamed and very, very uncomfortable, then you feel uncomfortable. So in reverse, that's also true. Stay comfortable, have some fun, laugh at yourself, and expect that progress will be gradual. The person you're talking with knows that. Expand your knowledge of the language as you did in your mother tongue. You use recognizable words and expressions and language patterns to make your way into unfamiliar territory. You expand on things that you already know and understand. So that's why progress is gradual, and you will find that you're comfortable with certain themes, and then you'll be comfortable with related themes, not necessarily something that is completely unrelated. You build on what you already have. So this is the communication phase of the force cycle, and in the next video I'll talk about the phase that I call evaluate. I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks.